move on. So what are you studying?
I just finished engineering.
Engineering. Oh wow. What made you take engineering?
It's interesting. I think there's opportunity to help people. So yeah, it always interests me. There's a lot of jobs in it.
There are. Because engineering also, because there's a lot of technical work.
Yeah.
Would you say you like to see how things are made, how they come together?
Yeah.
I think that's why this conversation will be more fruitful, because that's the question that we posed with regards to the universe. And as an engineer, anytime you see a piece of machinery or you see something, you've never said, when you look at maybe something complex like a microwave, you would never say that if this was left over millions and billions of years, it would just come by itself. So would I be, tell me if there's another option. I say when it comes to what we see around us, we can conclude either it made itself, either it came from nothing, or either it was created. So are there any other options that maybe I've missed out, or I'm trying to lead you somewhere? Yeah? Out of these, because you said Simon, yeah?
Yeah.
So Simon, logically, let's stick with logic. Sometimes people say, oh, what if I'm in the Matrix? What if I'm in a dream? What if I'm here? What if I'm there? What if I'm here? What if I'm there? So we'll just stick with just logic. What answer makes the most logical and common sense, yeah? So out of these three, to you, Simon, what makes the most sense to you?
To me, I'm atheist. I don't believe in evolution or anything. No, sorry, I believe in evolution rather than divine creation.
But bear in mind, evolution talks about organisms, isn't it? It doesn't talk about how matter and how organic and inorganic matter came into being. Evolution only deals with, of course, life forms evolving, change over time, mutation, etc., etc. So we're talking about the origin, the beginning.
Origin, the first organic.
Yeah, just the beginning of everything that you see around you. Do you think, when you see everything, do you think that it created itself like a rock? You're not going to say a rock evolved, isn't it? You're not going to say mountains or seas or stuff like that evolved. So would you say it created itself, came from nothing? Or it makes sense that something as complex as what we see, and you as an engineer, that it makes logical sense that there could be a creator? I'm not saying there is, could be.
The potential's there. I would say that there's as much evidence for that as there is for any other explanation, but I would say that there's, from my point of view, very little evidence of any explanation at all.
But more so for it being created? Is that what you said?
I'm saying there's equally little evidence for all explanations.
Okay, interesting. But when we say that the universe created itself, logically that doesn't technically make sense. I wouldn't put them on an equal footing. Reason being, the universe creating itself is known as the cosmic bootstrap. It's like trying to pick yourself up using your shoelaces.
Yeah.
You see? So there's a logical contradiction in that sense, but also in the sense that the universe created itself presupposes that there's a universe to begin with. You see?
Yes. Yeah, I know. I would say that. Yeah.
So you'd probably say that's a bit less than the others, yeah?
No, I would say that it has more evidence up until the point of the Big Bang, and then before that there's a point of singularity, so there's absolutely no data. Time didn't exist. It is literally the beginning of creation, so there is no evidence for anything before that because there was nothing to have evidence of. That makes sense.
But the thing, Simon, is when you say evidence, what are we regarding as evidence here?
Any record whatsoever.
Am I correct to assume that you mean empirical evidence? Is that what you regard as evidence in this conversation?
Anything at all, any records, any, I guess it's empirical evidence.
Empirical. But would you also accept how even science doesn't rely solely on empirical evidence. It will rely on other forms of evidence.
Yeah. That's
So
why I say each one is equally little evidence to support that, whether it's, the Big Bang Theory, there's a large amount of scientific guesswork or whatever. So I think there's equally little evidence to support that as opposed to divine creation or whatever.
So I'll posit to you that out of the three options, and you can challenge me again, when we look at what's around us from our understanding, rationally, logically, something creating itself doesn't rationally make sense. It's just like I mentioned, something lifting itself, or like a mother giving birth to herself. There has to be her mother and father that then, they copulated, then the mother became pregnant, and then slowly, keep going forward. That's really loud. Abdul Karim, let's move. It's too loud. It's too loud. Yeah. Should we just move ahead?
Mostly about religion, like
that's what it boils down to in the end, isn't it? Like, anytime somebody, where did we come? Where did this? Where's that? Science deals with the how, and religion answers the why.
yeah.
So because it's not a realm of science, and when science does try to delve into it, it makes blunders, it makes mistakes, because obviously it's not its remit, it's not its field. Yeah, no, it's
Independent.
Yeah, it's just independent people. I think if I say no to one person, then he's like, oh, why are you siding with that person?
Yeah.
So that's why I just, oh, you know what? That is a lot.
Yeah, no, it's just
Yeah. I'll probably have, it would look cooler if I lined them all here.
Yeah.
But the thing is that if I do that, I think they interfere with each other and it just messes stuff up. Yeah. So, Simon, I guess what I'm saying is that generally speaking, when, for example, we get up in the morning, there's certain rationalities and logics. For example, for you to even get up in the morning and come to Speaker's Corner, you have to acknowledge and appreciate that there has to be a degree of uniformity, regularity and stability in nature for us to even do science, for us to even go to work, come back from work, and for us to live a non-anxious existence, in the sense that, Simon was walking down the street, a tree flew and turned into Queen Elizabeth. People started questioning, what's the Queen doing? Then Simon turned into the Loch Ness Monster. People said, we found the Loch Ness Monster. And then suddenly Trump appeared out of nowhere, as if from a Pokeball. So it's ludicrous, it's ridiculous. But Simon, with all due respect, what I've noticed in the park is sometimes I'll have discussion with a lot of people that will claim to be rational, but the thing is, the rationale, I'm not saying this is you, but when it comes to everybody else or everything else, they'll say, you know what, you can't, I wouldn't agree or accept in my daily life things will just randomly pop into existence and pop out of existence. Because that would lead to life becoming an absurdity. Or things, mothers giving birth to themselves without the father. There's been outrage. The father is furious, reported by CNN. We don't hear any of that. But when it comes to religion, we're so liberal with a small L. We're like, hey, you know what? Maybe I'm dreaming, maybe you're dreaming, maybe we're both collectively dreaming. Maybe I'm an egg, maybe you're, this, or maybe that. So what I think when it comes to rationality, I think people withhold that when it comes to religion. That's why, and you're not going to be pinned down to anything. I just wanted to show you that if you follow the logical progression, even you will see that, logically, this did not come from nothing. Logically did not create itself. It needed an entity. Now we can discuss the entity, as did philosophers in the past like Leibniz and Aristotle and Ibn Sina and these individuals. Or somebody might say, you know what, I have an issue with what the religious adherents do. not per se with religion itself. Do you see? Because sometimes it's the emotion that clouds the rationality, and people will accept a multiverse, but they won't be able to accept the universe.
Yeah, that's right.
They'll multiply the problem, but they won't deal with the initial problem at hand. Do you see?
Yeah.
So, do you see where I'm coming from, yeah? So, rationally speaking, we can acknowledge that there has to be, that out of the three options, the creator option makes the most sense. Even if I now go to another track and I say, let's go philosophically, there's three types of existence, yeah? Even if you were the biggest skeptic, you would say, okay, there's dependency, independency, and non-existence. I'm presupposing that if you're such a skeptic that you're saying the only thing that I accept that exists is existence. Yeah, there is existence.
Yeah.
You accept there's existence, isn't it? Then would you say that there is dependent existence, independent existence, independent existence, and impossible existence?
Yeah, I guess so. When you say existence, do you mean existence of us? Or
Yeah, consciousness, or yeah, whatever we see around us. So would you agree also, sorry, were you going to say something?
No.
Okay. Would you also agree and accept that we and what you see around you is a form of dependency, dependent existence? That we're all dependent on something.
Dependent on something being created, or just dependent?
Just dependent.
Yeah.
We'll be dependent on oxygen, a toaster is dependent on electricity and this and that.
Gravity, etc.
Yeah, exactly. So now here's the logical conundrum I want to pose.
Okay.
Yeah? Do you think that we can have an infinite regress of dependent things?
What do you mean by infinite regress?
I'll posit this as like a analogy. If I am to throw one of these microphones, because there's just so many of them, yeah?
Yeah.
So let's just say I want to throw one of them. But before I am to throw one of them, I have to ask his permission.
Yeah.
He has to ask somebody else's permission, he has to ask someone else's permission, he has to ask, and it goes on ad infinitum. Would I ever get to throw the microphone? No. So logically, there has to be an end to that chain, which philosophically we call the necessary being. Yeah, not God yet. We're just saying that this is the argument: contingent, necessary, and impossible. I used the terms interchangeably of dependency and independency. Yeah, but the technical term is contingency, and necessity, and necessary existence. So there has to be a necessary being at the end of that chain. Otherwise, we wouldn't necessarily exist.
Yeah.
Do you see? Just like I wouldn't be able to throw the microphone, we wouldn't exist if it was an ad infinitum of dependencies. With me so far, yeah? Okay, great. So this default position of accepting that there has to be an end to that chain, which is the necessary being, most philosophers haven't had an issue with. They're called deists, yeah? Now the next step is that how do you now say that that necessary being is God? Which now you're wondering as well, like how is it going to jump from necessary being to God, yeah?
Yeah.
Okay, so let me just give you the criteria as Muslims, our criteria of God. Say he is God the One. This is in chapter 111. Yeah, so or chapter 112, Surah Ikhlas. Say he is God the One. Independent. He does not beget nor is he begotten, and there's none like him. That's our definition of a God. We don't believe that he's an old man with a beard, with a staff. We don't believe that he has a son that he sends down, that dies. We don't believe that he's a blue individual with 4 arms and daggers. We don't accept or entertain that at all. Why? Because philosophically, rationally, in terms of inference, the best explanation, there has to be an end to that chain. The end to that chain has to be a necessary being, number one. Now, logically, that necessary being is independent because the end to that chain. They have to have a will, because if they don't have a will, then they're contingent. They're not the end to that chain. They're a part of that chain. They have to have an immense amount of power, because power, by definition, if we say something or someone has power, power by definition you get from something else. You can't just get power. Yeah. So these are, and then when we look at intelligence, because there's intelligence and complexity, that logically infers that the necessary being also has intelligence. So that, in a nutshell, is our definition, the Muslim definition of a God. How does that sound logically and rationally to you from how I built it?
The dependence thing. You're talking about dependence on, for my existence, it's dependent on my parents' existence, which is dependent on their grandparents' existence.
That's right. Or even in terms of oxygen, in terms of food, nutrients.
Yeah.
All of these things are dependencies.
Yeah. And so when you say the base of all that dependency is the being,
the necessary being,
being, isn't it equally as logical that being doesn't have to be a being as such, but a set of laws? Like gravitational attraction is a law, and it dictates that everything that happens within our universe. And there's entropy is a law. Everything becomes less ordered over time.
Right.
In general, nothing ever becomes more ordered.
Interesting.
So it's a set of laws that define those dependencies. So everything relates back to those laws, which essentially defines the universe. And it doesn't explain sort of the dependencies of what came first anymore. It doesn't explain that part of your argument. It loses out there. But how would you refute that in terms of your beliefs?
So you think forces, yeah?
Yeah, in terms of
in a nutshell.
Fundamental laws kind of thing. That
fundamental laws.
Right. And how does that is that something that is at odds with your beliefs?
Not necessarily.
Would you say that those laws are below your necessary being, or how does that fit in with your worldview?
My point. Yeah. So when it comes to forces are descriptive and prescriptive. They're not creative.
Yeah.
Forces don't create anything. This was an argument posed by Stephen Hawking where he said the beginning of everything, it came from gravity. Gravity is the beginning of everything. But that doesn't necessarily make sense because gravity doesn't do anything. Gravity is a law that we use to describe and prescribe things.
Yeah.
For example, the law of arithmetic. That will never create money in my bank. Believe me, I've tried. It rather explains it.
Yeah.
Me working and doing something, that's the only thing that will put money in my bank, not the law itself. For example, the law of motion, which you probably studied in engineering, there's someone playing snooker, pool or billiards. The law of motion is not something that moves. That's what explains the ball moving, but it doesn't cause the ball to move. The cause of the ball to move is the individual hitting the cue.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. Would you say that if the necessary being had its action at the start and then did nothing else the rest of the time, would that explain, would that be something that makes sense, or would that fit into your worldview, or do you think it's having a continuous effect?
Yeah, so one of the criteria that we have for the necessary being, the characteristics, we believe that the necessary being is intelligent, and from intelligence comes wisdom. So I talked about intelligence, I said because of the complexity and everything that we see around us, but that also, I think wisdom is logical as well. That the necessary being is wise. Now, if we accept the necessary being to be wise, it's not wise to create something complex and entire systems and forces and everything and just leave it with no purpose and just let it waft in space like a cloud of smoke.
Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah? So that's our kind of perspective from a Muslim. Because, and the reason why I wanted to kind of clarify our definition of God, because normally, Simon, you said, normally, Simon, people don't necessarily have an issue with a supreme being or a supreme power, but it's how people interpret it. Like they'll say, oh no, he has a son, or that the sun came down, but then there's the eternal sin, or there's this God, the God of the sea, and this and that. That is something that causes issues. That's why I wanted to break it down into the fundamentals, that we accept. Now from there, Simon, is there anything else that you say, maybe touch more upon this or that before I move on?
No.
Okay, so then a sign of wisdom, I was looking into this as well. How would you say is the best form of learning as human beings? What's the best instrument that we have and the most effective instrument that we have to learn, other than, of course, the faculties that we have, or to disseminate knowledge?
So you're asking what the best format of learning is?
The best medium of disseminating knowledge.
I guess practical experience, doing something for yourself.
Okay. I would add one thing on top of that. Let's just say, if as a school teacher, because I used to be a school teacher, if I